and it's very important that Al-Qaeda and others who would seek to kill us don't have a safe haven.
Thank you. Mr. Bill.
Were I in Congress, I would be in favor of extending the Bush tax cuts at all levels. This kind of we've known about this since, I guess, 2003, that this was coming. And what our Congress lacks is foresight. It's just incredulous to me that we would put a priority on cap and trade on the health care bill, whenever in fact, people are losing their jobs. And having these tax cuts permanent would just eliminate one more unknown factor for people that provide employment. And that's just critical to us. And it's critical. I've been in business for 17 years, and one of the first things I do if I start out on a new activity or something like that is I go, well, what's the tax impact going to be on me? And really, that's a poor way to make a decision. What decisions you need to make are, is there going to be a market out there for me? Is the economy going to support it? Can I get the resources together that I can do this endeavor with? But instead, we say, what's the taxes going to do to me? You've heard of the subchapter S corporation, and that's a real popular form for self-employed people. And what that allows self-employed people to do is to avoid paying self-employment tax. That's the whole point. And so this basic understanding of how business works is critical for someone that you're going to send to Congress. And that's why I think that I could help out in this respect. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sowers.
Well, it is no time to be raising taxes in the biggest recession we've had since since the Great Depression. So I support extending the cuts, but we have to get serious about this debt. We have to. $13.5 trillion. We need some folks to talk seriously about it. And one area that I know quite a bit about is the military. And any soldier that's been overseas has seen the waste, fraud, and abuse. Now, there was a congressman that came out of Missouri about 60 years ago. He had a military background. He started the Truman Commission to expose waste, fraud, and abuse in military contracting. It's something that we absolutely need today. And getting back to this issue of Afghanistan and the mission there, the mission is not terrain denial. It's not, because you can't accomplish that mission. Al-Qaeda has moved to Pakistan and Yemen and Somalia and North Africa. And as a guy that has had the mission to kill and capture terrorists before they kill and capture me, I get it. I understand it. And you look at this and this idea of terrain denial, I like to come back to our own experience in the Cold War, when we were facing another ideology and 30,000 nuclear tip weapons, nuclear submarines, corps, and armies. We did not send reservists and National Guardsmen everywhere we saw a communist threat. We were smart. We isolated, we contained, we deterred, we used aid and trade, and we occasionally sent guys like me to kill and capture the really bad folks or to work through proxies. And we let that system collapse in on itself. This is exactly what happened in Western Iraq. If you read through the studies on that, I will bring this perspective to Congress to make sure that we start fighting this war with much more intelligence.
Thank you. Mr. Van Dieven.
Yeah, I support extending the Bush-era tax cuts. However, cutting taxes without reducing spending is counterproductive, and spending is really where the area is. It's kind of weird for libertarians to be sitting over here talking about taxes because we are fundamentally opposed to all taxation. We believe that taxation is theft. So somehow or another, Congress still figures out a way to spend more than they can steal. I am a realist, however, and as much as I would like to see a complete repeal of the 16th Amendment, I know that this is probably not possible at this time, but I can appreciate people that think outside of the box, especially proponents of the fair tax. While I may not support the fair tax, I prefer a 1% flat tax on everything purchased inside this country, and that would force government to live within their means and allow people to keep more of their money. Thank you.
Thank you. This next question, the first response will come from Mr. Bill. We've talked about this quite a bit, And this question lets you zero in on a very precise answer. What is your definition of a victory in Iraq and Afghanistan?
I think both wars were supposed to have been in response to the September 11th attacks by al-Qaeda. So I think a victory would be counted as the ability to suppress al-Qaeda activities against the United States, and then leave it at that. The first time we invaded Iraq, we decided that our limited objective was to get the Iraqis out of Kuwait. And then after we got the Iraqis out of Kuwait, a lot of people advocated for let's go all the way to Baghdad. And following the Weinberger Doctrine, President Bush, the first one, said, no, we're going to stick with our limited objective and go after that instead. And the reason he said that was because, A, he wanted to stick to his word, and B, he didn't want to get involved in a civil war. And when you look at what happened in Iraq on the second invasion, that's exactly what happened. So as I said, the limited objective is to eliminate al-Qaeda operations against the United States. And it's also very likely that if you do stop them in Afghanistan, or even if they were in Iraq, which they never, I don't think that was quite proven. But if you do stop them there, they're going to come back again, like Tommy just told us. They're going to be in North Africa. They're going to come out of Somalia and Yemen and all these other countries because they're allowed to operate there. So that would be my limited objective. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sowers.
Well, I deployed twice to Iraq in 2004, 5, and 6, and I led a A-team, or a team of 12 Green Berets on the first deployment. And when I came there in 2004, no one thought an election would happen. People were being beheaded, and there were whole areas of the country that were under insurgent or al-Qaeda control. And one of the proudest photos that I have is a picture of me and the group of Iraqis that I started off training, and these were not former soldiers, to help secure their area. And they were holding up their ink-stained fingers. To me, I'll tell you about victory in Iraq from what I thought my best operation was in Iraq, which is when this same group of soldiers came 6 months later, and they said, we know where our number 2 bad guy is. What do you want to do? And I said, I'm leaving soon. What do you think you're going to do? They said, well, we're going to issue an order. We're going to mobilize the troops, and we're going to go capture the bad guy. I said, that sounds great. I'll stay in the house. And they went and did that. And in a process that would have taken me hours to get approval up through the bureaucracy, they accomplished the mission in 45 minutes. So victory in Iraq is handing it over to the Iraqis, to what should be a stable ally for us. In Afghanistan, it's a far, far different issue. There, the prospects of having a centralized government that is not corrupt are very, very low. We have to recognize that and redefine our objective. We will be able to ally with one of the tribes in Afghanistan. We will be able to have a limited presence there, predominantly special operations, but we don't need to continue to pour the trillions of dollars that we are into that country.
Thank you, Mr. Van Dieven.
Well, this is another question that I just can't even start to conceive, because I believe that both the Iraq and Afghanistan wars were unconstitutional. We went into both countries with questionable objectives. Was it to find the man with the beard? Was it to bring American-style democracy to countries that really have absolutely no interest in it? Was it to kill over 100,000 soldiers and civilians, displace millions, or make our soldiers sick on depleted uranium? The best thing that we can do right now is withdraw from the Middle East and make sure that our veterans are taken care of through the creation of a trust fund so that they receive the benefits that they are entitled to. This is a massive unfunded liability. We don't know what the full cost of these wars are going to be for another 20 to 30 years. And I think it's time that we just got out of the Middle East altogether and started taking care of ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Emerson.
I agree that probably the definition of victory in Iraq would be to suppress activities of Al-Qaeda and others. You know, my son just got home from his second deployment to Iraq as well, and one of the things he worked very hard on was not only helping make the transition, particularly up in the Kurdistan area for a couple of months on this last tour, making the transition and actually building up a consulate that the U.S. would have there. On his first tour, he was in a more lively spot, to say the least. But spent a lot of time working with the Sunnis, who were, you know, the minority party, and trying very hard to actually get them engaged in the process of governance, and they were quite successful. I know the administration right now is really trying to reach out to moderate elements of the Taliban to try to do the same. And, you know, you have a totally different type of tribal system in Afghanistan, and I don't know if that in fact will work, but I do know that there are probably a few, perhaps, that are just sick and tired of fighting. With regard to the Veterans Administration, I'm glad that Rick brought it up, because it is absolutely critical. I mean, there is no excuse that, for example, John Cochran in St. Louis would actually call veterans and say that we didn't sterilize our dental instruments. It's absolutely vital that we be able to provide for our young men and women who, you know, are very heavy on rural, to have psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers. The VA needs to outreach better. It's certainly way too bureaucratic, and fortunately for our health clinic, our VA clinics here, they're stepping up.
We have time for one more question, and the first response will come from Mr. Sowers. Would you support a national flat income tax? Why or why not?
Well, this is an issue that, frankly, would take a little more study. I'm trying to focus on the things that I think are realistic right now. And there's no doubt that we've got a massive debt that we've got to get under control. There's no doubt that we've got to get people back to work. There's no doubt that we have to stop these bailouts, and there's no doubt that we have to end these wars. So when I'm looking at the tax structure, you know, I think that by the extension of the tax cuts, we can provide some stability so that people can plan, especially in these next key critical years, to make sure that we come out of a recession and we don't slip back down. But it's an issue that I would study more.
Thank you, Mr. Van Dieven.
Well, like I said before, I would support a 1% flat tax on everything that is sold in this country to support the few legitimate functions of the federal government, such as defense, not offense, and the enforcement of contracts. Going back to the earlier question, I just can't believe that after 10 years into this war, we are still talking about what constitutes victory. That to me is absurd. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Emerson.
Well, there's no doubt that we need to do something about our tax code. Not only is it far larger than the Holy Bible, but it has far too many loopholes and too many complications for individuals as well as business. And the idea of a flat tax is interesting, and hopefully will be addressed thoroughly in discussions over the reform of the tax code. I'm not averse to the idea whatsoever, and I think that it will definitely be in the mix. Let me also say that with regard to the bailouts, you know, when you're faced with economic collapse or potential economic collapse in this country, and your small town bankers are calling you from all over saying you've really got to do something about this, as difficult as it is, sometimes you just have to step up and take a tough vote in spite of the fact that it is not a politically popular vote. And I will tell you that is leadership.